Hello. I want to talk to all of you today about Claude McKay and his poem America, and just talk about the poem in general and what the meaning is for you have a better understanding of it. Claude McKay was around during the time of the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance is a time of artistic, intellectual, social movement based primarily in Harlem, but also in Manhattan and in the New York City area. Time frames around the 1920s, and most famous poets of that time period are going to be Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, and Claude McKay. This is a time where African Americans are out there and they're celebrating their ability to show off talents musically, artistically, lots of poetry, lots of writings going on. And also, when they're writing poems, they are able to talk about um, some of the flaws in society and their emotions and the way that African Americans have been oppressed. These emotions and these feelings and the reality of their life is now able to be portrayed and shown. It's a mixture of talking about that pain and difficulty, but it's also a celebration for the future during this time period. So Claude McKay was actually born in Jamaica in 1889, and then he moved to Harlem, New York. He published multiple books of poetry and established himself as a literary voice for social justice during the Harlem Renaissance. Many of the authors were born here, but he has a little different twist in his works because he was born in a different country. He was born in Jamaica and then moved here. His poem America, it's showing us what his thoughts on both America in general and also the racism of America are. He shares the hell of being a black man in a white man's world. He will also tell you that he loves America and he loves being here, even though it's difficult, and even though it is not equal or fair to the African American, he still loves it. He's very optimistic for change. He thinks that the future of America is going to be better, that the country's headed in the right direction. And although there's flaws, he still is somewhat reluctant, but he still loves his home of being in America. Themes. So there are two themes that come out in his poem America. We see his anger with what's not right and what's not fair. And we also are seeing the relationship between the nation and the disfranchised. Famous quotes in his poems. I'm going to go over two. The first one says, I will confess, I love this cultured hell that tests my youth. So if we look at the term cultured hell, we would typically think not good, not positive. This is a horrible thing. But he loves it. Typically, something you refer to as hell is not something you love. So there is a twist. It's a little bit of irony in his poetry. And it's kind of explained that despite the violence and despite the oppression and despite the flaws, he still loves the country. On one hand, the cultured and cultured hell confirms America's achievements, anticipating the wonders and priceless treasures at the end of the poem, and countering any notion of the modernity of a cultural wasteland. Yet, the hell is also acknowledging that America can be a place of misery and a place of extreme suffering. It is not a wonderful place for everyone. Another quote in this poem says, Yet as a rebel fronts a king and state, I stand within her walls with not a shred of terror. Okay, so political language of the poem. The speaker is comparing himself to a rebel before a king and a state. The word king implicitly is going to comment on the hypocrisy of the American democracy. And McKay, who wrote eloquently and often on the need for resistance, here acknowledges his own status as a rebel. He's against it within the walls of both America and within his form of the sonnet. He rebels at times. He beautifully uses metaphors, similes, alliteration. It's all out there. So some of his language we see. She feeds me bread of bitterness. Okay, well, this is a metaphor comparing America's treatment of the speaker to giving him bitter bread to eat. He sinks into my throat her tiger's tooth. So, a metaphor comparing America's ill treatment and violence of the speaker to the bite of a tiger. My breath of life is a metaphor comparing the speaker's well being to breath. Her vigor flows like tides. Well, here's a simile comparing the America's vigor to the tides. Her bigness sweeps my being like a flood. So another simile, it's going to compare America's sweeping bigness to a flood. As a rebel fronts a king in state. This is a simile comparing the speaker to a rebel before a king. We were just talking about that. I stand within her walls, a metaphor comparing America's and implicity, the sign it's confines to walls. In touch of time's unerring hand. So this is a metaphor comparing the workings of time to a hand. And then, like priceless treasures, a simile comparing America's wonders to invaluable treasures. Alliteration, it's just going to be alliteration is repeating um, the 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 beginning sound of a consonant in one line. So we see it in bread of bitterness, the bread bitterness, tiger's tooth, the T and the T. Then assonance is going to be repetitions of the vowel sounds. So my breath of life, I sound like I. Like tides into my, again, we have the I sound. Her hate, alliteration. I gaze into the days, assonance, and then touch of times is more alliteration in the poem. The irony, the referring to America as loving its cultured hell. It's ironic claiming that the speaker loves the country and loves America, even though it's a hell. So the whole poem, this is the one message that's portrayed. So it's throughout the entire poem we are seeing this irony. Major conflict. The conflict of the poem is simultaneously that the protagonist is up against America. So America is going to sustain him and keep him going, but also harm him. So the internal conflict within the speaker regarding his feelings towards America, as he both hates and resists the country, but also loves it. Now he's seeing a love towards the changes that are being made and towards the hopefulness of more changes in the future. The speaker is the protagonist, and America is the antagonist. And then I have one more Claude McKay poem that I wanted to share with you and just um, show a different side of how he writes. Like I focus this on America. That's what you read and what I wanted to focus on, but I want to share this as well. If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us die, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their thousand blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men will face the murderous cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. So I really like this poem. He is looking at if we're going to die, don't let it be like hogs. Picture how a hog dies slaughtered, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us barks mad, hungry dogs, making their mock. No, if we're going to die, let us be nobly. How do you die nobly? What does he saying that we, referring to African Americans, need? That our precious blood may not be shed in vain. It goes on to say, though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for the thousand blows deal one death blow. Basically saying if we're going to die, let us fight for the country. Let us go to war and protect the country of America. Let us join you. It's a real wake up call for people because African Americans were not seen to be equal and they were not treated properly. And this time period really brings forth not only an equality, but a celebration of who African Americans are and what talents they have and how they can create this music and this beat poetry that other people are loving and want more of. So it's really a celebration of differences in general, which is what America's supposed to be all about. Hopefully, this helps you understand the poem a little bit better for your future assignments. Thank you.